Hi, geographers. We're going to start out talking about scales of analysis. Don't ever confuse it with map scale. This is scales of analysis, and I'll go into more detail about what this is. So what are you going to do with this video? Well, I'm going to be explaining the 12 slides to you, and as you watch the video and as you see the slides, I want you to pause it after each slide, and I want you to rewrite what you saw in your own words, or create a question about it, an open-ended question, answer the question. I want you to be very thoughtful when you're watching this because we're getting close to test time, so you really need to think about these things. And so there's 12 slides. You should have something down for each slide in your own words, explaining what you see and what you hear. Here you see the objectives and essential learning pulled directly from the College Board website for 1.6 for human geography. So you're asked to define the scales of analysis used by geographers. So define is exactly what it sounds like, define. And then explain what scales of analysis reveal. So it's really important that you take definitions to the next level and you really think about what the information is telling you. What are the maps telling you? And so that's what we do here. So we're going to be zooming in and zooming out to tell a different story depending on the level. So the first level of analysis is global. You're considering the entire world and looking at data from the entire world. Then there's regional. So regions can be all different kinds of sizes. One of the things that you're going to have to do is learn the human geography regions for Unit 1. And those human geography regions are pretty large areas. So it can be bigger than a country. So the next level is state, country, and national. So in human geography, just accept it now, state and country mean the same thing. So state doesn't mean part of a country like it does here in the United States, like California is a state. Well, not for human geography. California is a sub-state. So just accept it. We'll spend more time on it, but a state equals country equals national level. So those are one and the same. And then we have sub-state, which would be divisions of a state, divisions of a country into smaller parts, like the state of California, the state of Hawaii, and the state of Iowa. Then you go down to county level. Not every area in the world is it called a county. And even in the United States, in one state, they're actually not called counties, they're called parishes in Louisiana. But it's the division of our sub-state states. And then we have the city or local. So, for example, we have Eastvale as a city, but local would, maybe be our school district. So that is local. And then we have a census tract. So the census tract is like a voting precinct. So it's a smaller part of a city where it's more like a local like neighborhood, and everybody in that neighborhood votes at the same voting precinct. And so if you look up Eastvale, I don't know exactly how many voting precincts it has, but it may have 10. So it's a smaller division. So this one gets a little confusing where we have small scale maps show a large area. So imagine you're on an airplane and you're looking down at the ground, and the things on the ground, like huge buildings, look like houses, and cars look like ants. And so you end up with very small details. So what is small in a small scale map? The details are small, but the area that it covers is huge. So think of a globe as the ultimate small scale map. And then with a large scale map, this one is going to show a much smaller area, and then you're going to see that area in much greater detail. So what is large in the small scale map? The details. If you're on the ground making a map, like you're out there walking around kind of mapping the area, that's like the ultimate small scale map. And so, and you're looking up and you look up at a tree, you can see the outlines of the leaves. If you wanted to put that in your map, you could on a small scale map. But imagine making a world map. Are you going to put outlines of the leaves on the trees? No, you can't fit all that detail in there. So the large scale map gives you a lot of detail. The small scale map gives you a lot of area. So this is a global scale map because you're looking at the entire globe, but it is a national level of analysis. And the reason it's a national level of analysis is that the countries have different colors depending on their level of poverty. So if you were looking at a global map and it had, let's say, a dot map and it had concentrations in particular areas all around the world, but there's no consideration of country, but you just see like certain areas where like it's many more dots for the number of people in poverty. But it didn't have, there's no country division. Then it would be global level analysis. But once you break it down into the countries, it becomes national level analysis. And once you make those countries different colors, now you're having a national level analysis. So this is a national scale map, but we have a sub-state level of analysis. So again, if you were looking at the entire map and there's no division of states, it's just the United States as one whole map, and you're making a dot map again, and then it's going to have the concentrations of people in poverty, but there's no division of states. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's some states that, like, if you look at Louisiana, there's, it's really poor. So we have 16% of the people or more are in poverty. But if there's some really wealthy areas of Louisiana. So if you got rid of the whole like state thing, the state division, and you just did it by dots, then you would have a national level of analysis. But once you add those lines that represent our different sub-states or different states of the United States, you make this a sub-state level of analysis. And remember, I know it's confusing that the states of the United States are actually sub-states. And when we get to our political unit, you'll find out why. Okay, so this is where we start comparing the different scales and how they reveal different information. So if you look at the world map and you look at the number of people in extreme poverty, the United States looks really good on that map. We're in the, best color. We're like the light yellow. That's the best color. So like there's no poverty here, right? It's awesome. But then you zoom in a little bit. And then you start seeing pockets of poverty showing up more. And you can see that the United States actually, while it does have some some states with very low poverty, like Utah, Colorado, and Minnesota. Oh, and is that New Hampshire? New Hampshire. But then you have some states with relatively high 16% poverty rate in New Mexico, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Oh, and Washington, D.C. Okay, so, Puerto Rico. That's not really a state. We'll get into that later. So this is a national scale map, but it's a county level analysis. Yes, you do see the state borders, but looking at this chloropleth map, you're not seeing the colors dividing the states like you did on the last map. You are seeing the counties divided by color. So you see that you have particular counties that have 30% or more people living in poverty. You can see where those are. And just a hint, a lot of them are Native American reservation areas. And then you're going to see areas where they have very low levels of poverty. And you have bits of those in every state too. Well, maybe. Do you see it in New Mexico? A lot of poverty in New Mexico. But there are areas that have very low poverty as well. So this is a national scale map, but a county level analysis. So I hit a bit on this before, just going to reiterate that you have two maps with relatively the same information. One is in 2018 and includes Puerto Rico. The other one is poverty rates from 2013 to 2017, not including Puerto Rico. And you get different information. You look at some states like Utah, and in one map it looks pretty awesome. And then in the other map, you can see Utah does have some impoverished counties. So you just get more detail, and it gives you also an idea about the spatial patterns and how impoverished counties often cluster together. So you can see how in Louisiana and Mississippi and also Arkansas, you have impoverished counties clustering together right on their borders. That border is actually the Mississippi River. So you can see that there's some spatial stories that are being told. There are some patterns that are being told. We can also see that poverty isn't equally spread out through any state or any country. There's clusters of poverty and clusters of wealth throughout our country. So here we have the census tract, and we have cities that are divided up. And a census tract, as this says, is between 1,000 and 8,000 people. So it's pretty small. And this is our largest scale maps that we're going to be looking at, meaning that we have more detail, even more detail. So we can look at particular neighborhoods and find the highest levels of wealth within the city and the lowest levels of wealth within the city. So these are the same cities, and you can see where the neighborhoods are clustered. So in some areas, you're probably going to have, like if you look at the one on the left, you're probably going to have large homes with huge lots, and on the right, you're likely going to have very small apartments and other high density housing. Okay, we have a few things to unpack here. So we have the map on the left, and this is a map of the largest countries or the largest number of displaced populations. So that means they're refugees. So the countries in red have high numbers of refugees, and there are people leaving their countries because there's problems. They're being forced out. The problems can be as bad as ethnic cleansing, where, mass extinction of people, much like the Holocaust. And then other problems are that people are just fearing for their lives, or that it's like dangerous to live there, maybe because it's not sanitary, or there's problems. And so they're moving out. And so they seek other places to live. And then the chart on the right is the maternal mortality rates in Ethiopia and sub-Saharan Africa. So why do they separate Ethiopia? Because Ethiopia is kind of deserty, so it's kind of Saharan, but it's really sub-Saharan too. Sahara refers to the desert that is in the northern part of Africa. So if you think about like Egypt is part of the Sahara Desert. So everything that's below that Saharan region in the north part of Africa is considered sub-Saharan. And you can see that Ethiopia looks like they had a pretty high rate of maternal mortality. Oh, what is maternal mortality? That's when a lady dies when she's having a baby. That's maternal mortality. And so in 2000, what is that, 4, let's say, Ethiopia had higher rates of maternal mortality, but their rates of maternal mortality have declined at a faster rate than the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. So let's take that information that we have there and let's look at the map on the left again. So some of the things that the map tells you are that with the circles, if you look at the red dots, that's the number of people forcibly displaced. And then you have the big yellow dots, and that represents the total population. So you have some countries where they're by proportion, their reds and yellows are much different. So, like the worst places are South Sudan, because the red dots probably, let's see on the numbers, yeah, it's almost half. The displaced people are almost half of the total population. But then you look at Ethiopia, and theirs is relatively small. So that could be one reason why their maternal mortality is declining. Oh, compared to the overall country. If you look at Somalia, theirs is pretty bad. You look at Sudan, theirs is pretty bad. And the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have a pretty big red dot too. So if you look at these countries and then you look at Ethiopia, compared to their total population, Ethiopia doesn't look as bad. Well, what does that have to do with maternal mortality? Okay, you try having a baby when you're escaping from your country. Do you think you're going to have a higher chance of dying? Yeah, probably you are. Because you're not going to have a doctor, you're not going to have a hospital, you're going to be having this baby on the side of the road probably. So, yeah, it's going to be a mess. So there is connections. And so that's what we do in human geography. We look at different levels of information and we make those connections. So when you're done, you're going to want to make sure that you can answer these questions, define scale of analysis used by geographers. So what is it? What are the different levels of analysis? And explain what those different levels of analysis reveal. You can give examples that I talked about in the earlier slides. You can come up with your own examples. So when you're done with this, I want you to be able to answer these questions.